are you doing?
I thought we were talking about opera.
Hey there, Nomads of Lore. I'm Sean.
And I'm Jonathan.
And together we are Mead and Mischief, your home away from no home. Today we are going to be talking about another subgenre of science fiction. This one is going to be space opera. And don't worry, that doesn't necessarily mean it's opera in space. We're not going to be butchering your favorite opera tunes here. We're also not even going to be going back to the days of Jonathan and I cleaning camp cabins, singing show tunes to keep us from falling asleep after a hard week of camp. Things, like Fiddler on the Roof, Les Mis, all the greats. And so we're not going to do that either. Don't worry. We are going to talk about what space opera is. We're going to give some examples to explain it well better, and do all of those things. Remember, this is not supposed to be an exhaustive list of every space opera work. Far from it. We're going to try to keep the list relatively brief, more brief than our last genre deep dive, I think. Going to kind of tighten it up a little bit. These are just kind of some of our favorites. In a few, we're going to also explore a few different mediums, some movies, TV, even some board games and things in there. Yeah. Kind of look at some different options, give you ideas, especially if some of these already tickle your fancy. You may want to look at some of these other options as well.
Your whatsy?
Sorry. I don't know. Phantasmagorical.
Like, comment, subscribe. Absolutely. Hey, if you have a favorite... not classic. I don't know. I'm stuck on the last
modern,
video.
Whatever.
Yeah, modern, whatever.
Space
opera. Have a favorite space opera? Comment down below. Let us know. Opera? Anyone? Whenever this term comes to mind, we often think about, obviously, vocals. Loud, grandiose, big, vibrato, lots of intense moments of passion, right? And, but... this term has been used in a lot of different places, and obviously space opera doesn't equal opera, but you keep those same grandiose, wide open space ideas and put it in space opera. So you may have heard of a rock opera. Whenever we take into consideration what opera means, you may have heard of a rock opera, which is similar. It's a grand, story-driven rock song by maybe album by the likes of somebody like Queen or Pink Floyd.
Yeah, a little not very well known band.
Little tiny bands, alternative rock. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, but if you take the same thoughts that apply there with the story driven and the grandiose, and you apply those to something like space opera. Science fiction, you start to get an idea of what space opera really is. It also often has some melodrama and romantic elements. Interestingly enough, this genre has definitely had a decline over the years, but as we come to talk about our examples, you'll see that some of those examples are still very modern and very relevant to today. So,
sure. Absolutely.
What are some good examples of this?
In our examples list, we wanted to start with kind of three really big examples that more people have heard of. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about them. Some of them we've talked about at length and other things, and they're just more well known. But we wanted to kind of frame the mental picture with three big examples, and that's Star Wars. Star Wars absolutely falls in the space opera genre. We've talked about Star Wars a lot on this channel already. Star Trek, absolutely. Hey, talking about all these big galactic interplanetary stuff. Dune absolutely fits in the space opera genre. Again, these big multi planets and big giant civilizations and races and all these big, huge, epic things. I'm always saying big and huge and gigantic a lot. But that's really some of the biggest hallmarks of...
That's what the word does. That's what... I mean, you've got the space element, and space is just space.
Right.
But the opera portion is what makes it the grand. Because you've got space sci-fi that can just be more like...
all kinds of things.
What's the one we used as a... not Defiance, but the Dark Matter. Dark Matter is it does have some grand scale to it. It's probably on the edge of being a space opera, but At the same time, it's very focused on just that team.
Right.
The whole story is
Or
on
things like
these
Firefly
on these
could
people.
be similar to what you're saying.
Yeah, and so they're kind of on the edge of being space opera, but they don't have quite the grandiose scale that Star Wars does. You know, with Star Wars, you have all these other stories that are told. You know, they have the main 3 movies, and then there was how many hundreds of books written that were about other characters. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. Sometimes you can have a large universe without it really falling kind of in that pigeonhole of space opera. You could split hairs. Again, we've said several times about these that we're not trying to have academic debate here. We would love to discuss with you in the comments. Absolutely. That we would love that. It'd be totally a lot of fun to have a nice, civil, polite discussion about, agreeing or disagreeing. It's okay to disagree.
Civil on YouTube.
Yeah.
See how that goes.
Good luck to us, huh? These next examples, some of them are so those are our 3 big examples that kind of frame the whole picture. And we're going to go through a few other examples in a few different categories in TV shows and whatever that are maybe a little less known. So if you like those 3 big things, any of them, you might want to look at some of these other options. So these are a little bit more esoteric, isn't quite the word, but ones that you may or may not have heard of in some other genres. So let's dive in.
So to start off the list, we're going to dive into something we haven't talked a lot about on this channel, which is something we like a lot. We've played a lot. Well, probably not as much as some other YouTubers out there, but we love board games. And so we'll start off the list with a board game. It's a little game called Star Realms.
Yeah.
It's a 2-player card game, drafting card game, that's pretty easy to pick up for the whole family. The space opera element is more the artwork than really the story. The story is just kind of window dressing. But it's very, very light. So it's a great little game. You could definitely pick it up for a date night or something like that.
Yep.
With you and your wife, or play it with kids.
Yep.
It's very easy to pick up, very easy to get through.
Like Star Wars and
there's also games. A flip. There's the exact same game, but in fantasy elements called
Hero Realms.
Yeah, I have that one. I don't even know why I can't remember the name, but I have the Hero Realms. He has Space Realm, and they're both really fun. So
yeah, it's a good one. Good one for date night. Our first TV show example, and this one is really popular, or it was, less so now. And so you may have heard of this one. It's Battlestar Galactica. Now, we are specifically talking about the 2004 one. The older ones from the 70s and 80s, they're good, campy fun. If you're really kind of sci-fi nerdy, you probably have already seen them. But this Battlestar Galactica, the 2004 one, is a little more accessible. It's kind of more modern, gritty take on science fiction. It's a fun one. It's again big space epic with big space battles. The basic premise is these robots are fighting humans, and they destroy the main human planet called Caprica, and now the humans are stuck, and they go off looking for the mythical planet of Earth. And so, they have legends of this planet Earth, and so they go trying to find it and all their adventures. It's fun. It's still a bit campy, not nearly as much as the old one. We'll give brief content warning. Reviews you trust. There's some. It's not terrible, but there's some content that would be questionable especially for kids and stuff. So look at that.
So our first movie example, also a campy space epic called
very campy,
called The Fifth Element. It's a little movie that Bruce Willis and Mila Jovovich are in. The Earth is going to be destroyed by a large alien, right? Large, crazy
planet destroying, kind of like Galactus.
So Bruce must help Lilu, or Mila, who barely knows how to speak English. Big bada boom. Yeah. And he's got to help her save the world. Content warning on this as well. Reviews you trust. This one's probably a little worse. So I believe it's rated R, right?
I think it's PG-13.
Oh, okay.
I think.
It's been a while. It's been a while since I watched it.
It's actually fairly clean. There's one scene that's very briefly questionable. Well, and another one at the end, but it's extremely campy, lighthearted fun, silly Bruce Willis. Our first book example that if you're into space opera and like some of these other big things, our first example is from the great granddaddy of science fiction himself, Isaac Asimov, and that's the Foundation trilogy. Super huge, epic in scope. Now this is hard sci-fi. We've got a video, check it out in the iCard, talking about hard versus soft science fiction. This is very hard sci-fi. It's pretty dry and really slow, and each of the 3 books in the trilogy has 3 parts, and each one of the 3 parts follows a different group of characters in a different time period. So there's a lot of stumbling blocks to modern readers. So if you are just a huge Star Wars fan, don't think you're going to jump into this without some very different tone and setting, but it's huge, epic. I mean, he set out to write. Basically, Asimov read the rise and fall. I almost said the rise and fall of the Third Reich, but no, the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, and he was kind of up against the deadline, and he decided, okay, let's write Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire in space, and so he did that, and he created some new. He created psychohistory and all this stuff that basically predicting the future and doing all these things and trying to prevent all this. It's kind of irrelevant to today's conversation, but it's this big, huge, epic, sweeping thing. So if you're really into big, huge world building with with more interesting concepts than interesting characters, you should absolutely check it out.
Our second board game example is unfortunately one that neither one of us have gotten to play, but we have talked about it. In fact, I own the 3rd edition. I don't even think we want to even mess with it. I kind of got it on by accident. I think we're going to get the 4th edition someday and play it anyway. Totally. Twilight Imperium, 4th edition. It's a super epic all day. It's kind of like Axis and Allies. It's one of those things that you play for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, and then reset up again and play for more hours. Super epic space opera, really fascinating. I was going to say
fantasying,
fascinating alien races and worlds and all that kind of stuff. So
politics.
Anybody up for a game?
Yeah, if you're in the Lubbock area,
yeah, we'd love to play with you.
We're actually totally serious.
Yeah, totally,
by the way.
Totally.
So hit us up.
Yeah.
So our second television example is a lesser known, both of us really like though, science fiction show, not science show, definitely not, called Farscape. It first aired in 1999, and it stars,
long ago.
Right? It stars Ben Browder. He's great, and I really like Ben Browder. I like him in that. I like him in Stargate Atlantis, and SG-1 later. Those, don't get me started. But anyway, he's a great lead. Perhaps more. Yeah, here we are back again. Perhaps more interesting in that show is that it's also a Jim Henson production. And so, and I know that's kind of some of you who are feeling more serious and are like, oh, that's dumb. And maybe it is. There's some campy elements, kind of, but it has puppetry, and it has these really cool alien races. One of the coolest is this female character who is a plant, but she's this blue plant. She doesn't really look like a plant. We don't even figure out that she's a plant until later, and her race is fascinating. All these different characters are just super interesting and fun. When he ends up getting sucked through a wormhole to this other planet, he finds himself mysteriously on the ship, who discovers this ship is kind of like a space whale kind of type thing. It's like it's an alive ship, and all these adventures happen to him, and it's really fun. It's fairly I'm going to give a tentative content warning because I feel like I don't remember. I don't think there's much of anything in it, but I don't. But because I feel not remembering content well enough, I'll tell you to go ahead and look. But
yeah.
I think it's pretty dang clean. But
yeah,
check it out if you're concerned for sure. But it's super fun, campy, silly, great, cool alien races, fun quirky villains, all kinds of stuff.
What we've said that word a lot. So what does campy mean? I just want
viewers. That's a great question. That's actually a great question. In case you're confused, or if I know we've had a few viewers where English is not their first language, and so it could be confusing. So what we mean by campy is kind of silly humor a little bit, maybe not really refined, and kind of. It's hard to say without giving examples. Things like humor from like Gilligan's Island or Beverly Hillbillies. I know if you don't know those, that's maybe a terrible example. I may be making the problem worse. Just Google it, all right? It's fine.
Andy Griffith, Barney Fife.
Yeah,
anyone?
sure. Yeah, especially season 1. Andy in season 1. Where it's. Good point. I'm glad you brought that up. But we're going to get lost in all. We like too many things.
That's right.
We could ramble about some of these things for a long time.
Our second movie example is The Black Hole. It's a 1979 late 70s Disney film. It's a little bit dark, and it was actually made to kind of capitalize on Star Wars success. Unfortunately, it was a little dark and probably a little too cerebral for the crowd at the time, and so it didn't do too well at the box office. This one probably content warning on this
mild
one.
Content for young kids.
Yeah. It's just dark.
I remember watching it as a pretty young kid, and I remember the ending being a little bit scary to me. Probably not for much. I mean, you know your kids, but most kids over 5 or so. I mean, it's probably going to be fine.
Yeah,
it's worth a check. You got Disney Plus for sure. It's
it's
one you may not jump at if you've never seen, but it's fun. Yeah. It's a fun little watch. Got some cute robots. The second book that we want to talk about is a 4 for 1. But we'll start with the first one, and that is the Ender Quartet by Orson Scott Card. I personally have to include the Ender Quartet and not just Ender's Game. Ender's Game is a great book, but I love Speaker of the Dead. Still one of my favorites. Easily top 5 books. But anyway, it's pretty huge in scope. It uses more Einsteinian physics when it comes to space travel, and so there's all kinds of interesting time stuff. The first book is kind of a military training camp drama, and with these is learning how to fight in space and then learn how to command ships in space, and Ender struggles, the titular character, and then all these things that happen as the humans fight the buggers and all of this stuff that goes on, and it's quite fun. There's a little bit of content warning in that one in particular. There's a little bit of language in it, but it's really good. It's quite fun. After that, the trilogy that follows, the Speaker trilogy, is really, really great. Much different, though. You might want to read some more detailed reviews. We should totally make one, or even I should make one, because it is very different than Ender's Game. So that's always it's important to talk about it that way. That if you go into Speaker for the Dead thinking you're going to get Ender's Game 2, you're liable to be disappointed. And so it's really good, and it's very different. It's got interesting mystery. One of the coolest alien races I've ever read or watched. And a lot of other stuff, some really neat relational things, and it's really good. Really, really worth the read in 2021 still.
Very cool. Yeah. Our third and final board game example is Fantasy Flight Star Wars Armada. So it's just like it's a miniatures game. It's just like X-Wing, or if you haven't heard of X-Wing, it's like Warhammer 40K miniatures game. But instead of being focused on starfighters like X-Wing, it's focused on the larger battleships. And so it's got a more large scale space opera feel. Very fun. Actually, I've never played it. We've never played it.
I've played it. Well,
I
have like 3 little ships. Yeah. I need to get more.
We've played X-Wing together, and that's fun. So I assume that the larger would of course be fun. Yeah. Fantasy Flight's very good with their games. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely check that out.
Worth checking out for sure. our final space opera TV show that we want to discuss is Flyer. I'm really struggling with that word. I've said it about 50 times now.
Firefly.
Firefly. The very short run science fiction television show.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, that's probably true. It probably would have got run into the dirt, but that's whatever.
We will never know.
We will never know. That's right. So Brown Coats Unite. Yay. Obligatory. It is a Western in space. That's what Gene Roddenberry set out to make with Star Trek, and Firefly really answers on that promise, on that idea, even more than Star Trek. You can see it in the original Star Trek, but Firefly is absolutely a Western in space, and it's got all gunslingers and a captain who's rough and tough. One of the coolest things about it is it sets up really, like from the first episode. This is not Star Trek. I mean, the captain shoves a dude into an engine. It's there's not graphic in that scene, but. Yeah, but there is content warning. It's Western in space. Filled with complete with brothel, stuff and whatever. There's not too much.
Lady of the Night is kind of like praised in this. It's not praised, but they're elevated in their stature. They're actually like ambassador level.
Kind of like some other sci-fi stuff where it's like a escort, like a prestigious thing. But anyway, reviews you trust, all that. It's great fun, super fun. We talk about a cast that has good chemistry. Oh, yeah. Whatever else you may say, good or bad about it, the cast has amazing chemistry.
Yep. And what's crazy is that same cast has been in several things together since that. Not all of them together, but like one or two here and there, and. They're good.
It's really
and there's been talks that it might come back.
There's been talks.
I know I'm kind of in the camp that hopes that it doesn't, because I think with Sean that I agree with Sean in the fact that I think at this point, who knows what would have happened back then, but at this point it might.
Well, and if they hadn't made, we're
rabbit
get
trail.
excited about all these things. A lot of fun things to talk about. You should join in the conversation in the comments.
That's right.
But it. That since they made the film Serenity to kind of close out some of the loose threads, that really capped it. I don't think as much fun as it was. I don't think they should bring it back.
They'd have to undo the movie basically in order to make it interesting.
A lot of stuff. Anyway, don't want to spoil things.
Nope. Number 3
last film
in the film. Yep. The last film is the Last Starfighter. 1984 super campy film about a kid who becomes really good at this arcade game. Remember arcade games?
Right. Yeah.
It's been a while. It's been a long while since I played an arcade game. I really would like to get one at some point. I would like to get a box that has a nice old school CRT monitor in it. And put a bunch of arcade games.
Maybe if we make our second making channel, slight spoiler warning for eventually. we can do that over there.
That's right. So anyway, kid learns that he's really great at this game, and then learns it's not just a game, and gets sucked into this world that's going to end the world if he doesn't save it.
Yeah, it's super exciting.
So
our final one where we the last couple of videos I've thrown off. We told you at the beginning these are more obscure. This one is very. So one of my all-time favorite authors is Stephen Lawhead. He's a Christian author, and he's Catholic or so, which maybe the same thing, whatever. But he lives in England, and whatever that's worth. We've mentioned one of his books before. No, we haven't. Just kidding. I just wrote this script and I'm remembering what I wrote. I have read these words before. And so he is mostly known for writing like Celtic fantasy and things, Welsh stuff. He wrote a trilogy that's a reimagining of Robin Hood. It's very good. You should check it out. Well, at least the first book's good. First book's called Hood. Check it out. But anyway, he also, in his earlier days of writing, he wrote a small handful of science fiction books. He wrote Dream Thief, which is also really great. You should look at it. And he also wrote the Empyrion Saga, which is 2-book saga. And it's written I don't remember what the date when he wrote it was, but it's later than like Asimov and Clarke and some of those other Golden Age authors. But it's kind of inspired by the way they wrote a little bit. But it's got these really good characters. It follows this character, Orion Treat, who he basically gets kidnapped. And they kidnap him, and then they're like, hey, you want to, save this other planet? And he's like, okay. And kind of goes and looks at all these politics and potential nuclear holocausts and all these things. And it's got there is some small content warning. I know it's that it's a Christian and author. There is one or two scenes that might give some people pause. It fits. It's anyway. You can look at it. But yeah, so check that out. If you've never heard of Stephen Lawhead, it's a good one to check out. That particular book, that particular duology is not heavy-handed Christian. You might think of his Christianity in his books as kind of akin to like a Tolkien or something, where you see themes, but it's not heavy-handed preachy. So it might be one you want to check out if you like that one in particular. If you like space opera, and some of his other stuff, if you like fantasy and Tolkien, all those other things. So I think that does it for us.
Hope you enjoyed today's video. First time we talked about board games. Hope you guys like that. If you put in some board games that you like. We would like to do some other reviews. We've got some really cool board games that we've played. We love. Yeah. And so maybe we'll get into that, dive into those a little bit more. Yeah,
especially the story ones and some of our other stuff.
That's actually kind of why we started this channel.
Right? We kind of have a video talking a little bit about that. We'll put it in the card.
Yeah. Y'all have a good day.
Bye.
So, opera, anyone? High notes to break glass.
So,
you had it on the
during your deadgum part.
You should not have put it there.
Opera. Nessuno dorma.